Hello, my name is Dan Johnson and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be reviewing, finally, Flux episode 1 called The Halloween Apocalypse. We have waited for this for such a long time. It's so good to actually have Doctor Who back, and very explosive, and I hope in the long run better than ever. And I'm going to say this probably for every episode that I do, but I just want to say that obviously this is my thoughts now. My thoughts will definitely change probably by the time that I watch this a second time, and also my thoughts will change as we go through different episodes, as I almost compare them in terms of how much storyline they've been given, whether that actually worked out, and whether the plot threads stuck the landing, which is probably the biggest concern that I have with the idea of a 6-part story, is that if it doesn't excite me at the end, and I don't feel satisfied, and that there's some kind of closure there, it's not going to be a very good series overall, however much I enjoyed the journey. Instead of doing the reviews as I did before, I really wanted to change them and to make them better and make them less of me rambling about an episode I've just seen and more like structured arguments, but obviously done quickly, if that makes sense, and done without a script and me just talking. And I thought the best way to do that, so that I don't get sidetracked and jump from one thing to another, is to add subtitles. So we have a whole bunch of subtitles, or subheadings would be the better term, and we've got things such as plot, characters, monsters, feel, negatives, all that kind of stuff, all wrapped and ready as title cards, and you'll be able to see when I change aspect. So each week there'll be every criticism, every reaction will be fitted into one of them categories. The plot of episode 1 is setup, really. It's setting up many aspects of the series that are going to pan out as we go along the series. And I hope that they work, as I mentioned before, but we've got lots of really cool things here. The Sontaran aspect is probably the aspect I'm most excited about. The Flux excites me as much as another world-ending story excites me nowadays with Doctor Who. You know, Edge of Reality, a lot of the lines could have been easily plucked from this episode and stuck into that game. You know, things like, if this happens, then the world ends, and it's the end of the universe if we can't stop it, kind of stuff. Very much just sort of cliched lines of dialogue now. I think there needs to be something a bit more behind that in order to make a really big point that this is the end of the world, and most of that means that you're relating it to characters and stuff like that. But at the same time, you have a really, really exciting start. Plenty of setups, as I've mentioned a few times. Weeping Angels, whatever the Swarm character is, that idea just seems interesting, and I would like to see where that goes. The Division, thank God that's making a comeback within Series 13, because you can't really leave that hanging after the Timeless Children. And then in terms of plot and plot development, I think it's all gone quite well. The only thing that I would have as a sort of criticism for this sector is that it feels scattered. It feels like Chibnall is trying to sort of throw everything at you and hoping it sticks. He's got, oh look, Weeping Angels for one scene. Introduce this character for one scene. Here's some Sontarans because you saw them in promotional images and we want you to get excited. So we're just going to kind of throw hints at everything, but not really elaborate on much, apart from the main aspect with the dog. That's not right, but you know, begins with a K. And then for Doctor and companions, well, I mean, there's an awful lot to talk about. I mean, I don't know much about Vinder, but I quite like Jacob Anderson, so he's quite cool. And then the other two women kind of blur together. You know, the one that gets kidnapped by a Weeping Angel and Dan's friend. I'm not quite sure what their purposes are yet, but I'm sure that's going to be developed throughout the series. But in terms of our main three, for the Doctor, I think that Jodie's really trying, and if you like Jodie's Doctor, you're really going to like her. But I think I'm just not as connected to Jodie's Doctor as many other people are, just because I'm not, I think. I think it might be because when she's acting, it really feels like she's acting. It doesn't come across as very natural, and I think that's what I'm disconnected from her. And then there's Yaz. And Yaz, I think, has had a very interesting time on the show because she started off with being introduced with Bradley Walsh and Tosin Cole, which meant that she was kind of the third wheel to that plot, which meant that she got left behind because a lot of the story of Series 11 focused around those two. And then you come into Series 12 and she's given a bit more, but she's not quite there. Then Series 13, they kind of just write in that she can do lots of cool stuff now. Like she can open alien prisons and stuff like that because she hasn't quite had that gradual development that people like Donna have had. Well, not Donna, but people like Martha has had, where she started off as this kind of woman that couldn't pass which was trying to pass with medical exams to become a doctor, and then you jump back to the Sontaran stratagem, and she's a unit doctor, and she can do all this cool stuff because she's had that time to grow, and I don't think Yaz has been given that properly. That was a bit of an over-exaggerated way, an over-embellished way to say that, but I think the point still comes across that Yaz just is very likeable. I think that she's kind of lost. She was kind of lost before, but I think now I'm beginning to like Yaz, which was a surprise because to begin with, you could have easily replaced her with a piece of cardboard. And then you have Dan. Now, I really love John Bishop. That's probably why I really took to Dan from the first scene. When he's sort of walking around and in the museum, I thought this is a kind of guy that you'd like to be your friend because he's quite reckless. He doesn't really care, but he's doing what he wants, and I think that's something that people always want to be like, because who doesn't want to be as cool as Dan, to have the confidence or to have the skill to be able to go into a museum, as well as the passion for it as well, to go into a museum and to talk to them like a tour guide. And also you have the fact he helps at a food bank. I'd love to see a little bit more about Dan's life, and I feel like he could be a very interesting companion. And I think he could be quite funny, quite good at problem solving. I think he will be a really nice addition once he's been fleshed out a little bit more. It's a shame, really, for his first episode, he wasn't really given much time. He just felt like a supporting character because he was just kidnapped by the dog creature, and because of that, it meant that he kind of fell back from being a companion just yet. But hopefully that'll come during the series. And so for monsters, we have 3. I'm not going to talk about the Weeping Angels or the Sontarans because they don't really have their moments here. I mean, the Weeping Angels only had 1 scene, the Sontarans had 2, and clearly the Sontarans are making a big appearance next week, so I'll talk about them then. So first, let's talk about Carvanista. Very cool makeup design. I love his entrance into the series and the idea that the people of Earth have some kind of partner in his species, or the other way around. I quite like, and I feel like it's quite silly, very impractical, but I like the idea that this has happened and that they've come to save the human race. I like that aspect on the idea that aliens are just here to invade, or they're here by accident. I quite like that intention. We have Swarm and his sister. Now, I think Swarm is absolutely amazing. I love the design. The shoulder pads are a bit 80s, a little bit silly, but I just love the idea of it. And he's very menacing. The silhouette shot, I think, was absolutely gorgeous. And I was thinking that it was quite frightening, to be honest. Quite frightening for 6:30. But I absolutely love his design, and I think he's going to be a very menacing, as well as his sister, menacing foe for the Doctor. Then you have the Flux. Now, I'm not sure about the Flux, because, like I said earlier, the idea of just another world-ending entity doesn't excite me as it used to. But I think the Flux, if we understood it a bit more, I think it would be very cool, and I'm sure we will within time. But the design for the Flux is lovely, I think, as well. And I'm beginning to find them quite a menace in the series, because obviously they're taking up all those planets. They're definitely demonstrating their full strength here, and I like the idea that there's, as much as I don't like the idea that there's the end of the world constantly, there is an idea of threat from the Flux and impending doom. So in terms of lowlight, I don't really have one this week. I don't think that there was something that I would deem a scene that I found boring in terms of pacing, because I think everything was everywhere, which meant that it never really stopped because of it, because you were constantly being given setup. So there was no real low light. I suppose the beginning, but that's not really a low light. For highlight, I think that the general visual look for this series is gorgeous, and I'm talking everything. I'm talking shots, costumes, the hitty shoulder pads, for God's sake. The VFX, I need to talk about the VFX. They are absolutely gorgeous. The shots of planets being destroyed, the amount of particle simulations that must have gone into that is gorgeous. It just looks amazing. Vinder's ship and that entire sequence, brilliant. The shots with the Doctor, Yaz and Dan standing by the TARDIS, amazing. I really could not fault the visual direction that this story went into, and I hope it continues. And now it's time for the negatives. I've had to mention it, but I think the scrambled start, the scrambled messing around with setting up, I mean, of course it's going to happen, and it's bound to be within the story as a first part, but I felt like it was setting up too much that general audiences were going to lose focus, because as a fan of Doctor Who, I'm going to be here whatever happens. I'm going to watch this thing anyway, and if you're just starting off and you get lost in the first half an hour where they're giving setup after setup after setup to things and you're not quite sure about it anyway, you're just going to turn off. And then my second negative also leads on from the first, I believe, but the first scene, the scene when they're dangling, I just felt like that scene was really badly written. I think that the scene when they're having the conversation, and it just feels very forced and very like, you did this to me, and then they're like, oh no, that's your fault. I never do anything wrong. I just felt like that was a little bit silly and a bit too scripted for it to feel like a natural interaction between the two of them while they're hanging upside down. And then finally, the feel. It's kind of like an overall thoughts, I suppose, and I think that Flux, episode 1, sets up this beautifully epic tale, but doesn't really elaborate on it just yet. I think there's an awful lot of a lot of stuff to get excited for. We've got Sontarans, Weeping Angels. I don't need to mention them all, obviously, but that kind of excitement has got me really intrigued to next week. I mean, when it ended, I was looking forward to see how they got out of there and how it would develop, because I feel like each time we watch an episode, we'll get a little bit of information about what's happening, and hopefully by the time we're into part 6, we've got the full picture, and then it becomes just about wrapping it all up, getting it so that you have that closure within the story. And I do hope to God that it makes this, it sticks this landing, because I think Flux will probably be Jodie's best series. But I don't want to say something that I'm later going to regret in terms of these reviews, because obviously it is only early days with it, saying that I think it's going to be the best thing that Jodie's done, and then if it doesn't stick that landing, that's going to be the issue. But I feel like I'm repeating myself over and over again with that concern now. But obviously I'm going to watch it a few more times. I'm planning to do What We Know So Far video. I'm not quite sure when it will get out. I'm hoping Thursday, fingers crossed. But it's kind of like a wrap-up and kind of directionally where I think things are going to go and how they're going to connect to things. It's basically how I would take Flux from where it is, and hoping that Chibnall has the same thought as I do, but they probably won't. So thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you did enjoy this video. If you did, make sure you please give it a like. I'm going to be reviewing all of the Flux episodes as they come out in this style, hopefully. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and shall see you soon. Goodbye.